In the land of Israel, it is always so exciting to find a new biblical site, especially sites that go back to the time of perhaps David, Solomon, and the kings of Judah and Israel in the First Temple period. Here, we're in a place called BETSAIDA, and I'll get back to that later. Excavations were conducted here about 2 kilometers away from the Kinneret, north of the Kinneret, and remains of a massive wall were found here. You can actually see the line of the wall to my left, and suddenly this huge protrusion, which is a tower in the wall. Now you must imagine the wall being much higher than what you see today. These are just the remains, the upper part being reconstructed by the archaeologists. So we have a wall here. It's a biblical wall. In a moment I'll tell you from which period exactly. But further excavations showed another line of wall. Now this is quite exceptional. In biblical towns, we usually have just one wall. Here we have two of them, one parallel to the other. Now obviously, when we find a wall, we also expect to find a gate. And if a gate, then there must be some kind of a passage leading to the gate. Actually, there is such a passage. It's right behind me. Let me take you to the biblical gate of this city. Follow me. As you can see, I'm actually walking on stones now. This is not a reconstruction. These stones are original stones from the time of the Bible, from the First Temple period. Okay, we have reached the gate. I suspect that you're not impressed. I can see it on your face. Well, do not be disappointed. This is just the beginning of what you're going to see. This is the external gate. In many biblical cities, there's a double gate, meaning one external, and then you get to the main gate. So this is just the external gate. Follow me and I'll show you the main gate, right around the corner. Welcome to the main city gate. When you look at the gate, what you see is just the opening. But this gate has a special design. To see that design, let's get into the gate and then we'll get back here again. So we're following the path into the gate. This is the threshold right now. And now I'm inside the gate house. This is the entrance, that's the gate. This is the gate house. It's a building, a fortification in itself. And this is one of the largest ever found in the country from the time of the First Temple. So if you follow me, you will find yourself inside a magnificent gatehouse with 4 rooms. One over there, another one over there, a third one over here, and a fourth one over here. They're made of basalt stones. You can still see the original stones. But there's also one interesting feature that you can see here reconstructed. It's not the original, but these are wooden beams. Stone is very rigid. When you build in stone, it looks very formidable, very strong. But when an earthquake occurs, it may crack and break the stone structure. To make it more flexible, what you do is you add this layer of wood. It lends flexibility to the structure. What would be the purpose of these rooms? Well, biblical gates in the First Temple period had different functions, apart from being simply the entrance to the city, which is the functional issue here. That's the main thing you'd like to have in a gate, an entrance to the city. In biblical gates, there were also different types of activities. Storage, for instance, of grain for time of emergency. We believe that in many of these gate chambers, a garrison would be stationed, guarding the gate, inspecting people coming in and out, making sure that hostile people are not getting into the city. And of course, commerce. People would basically stand here. Merchants coming from abroad, from outside the city, would sell their merchandise, their goods, and these will be taken into the city. So different aspects. But as it happens, in several cases, in several places in this country, during the First Temple period, gates also served as a place of the local cult, the local worship of the local god. It happens at Dan, it happens in many other places, it also happens here. And if you look to the right, outside the gate, there's a nice stone which is different than anything else you can see. This one here, another one over there. You can clearly see it's made of basalt, it is nicely carved, smooth, and it has a round top. These are quite common in antiquity. We call them in Hebrew matzevot. In English, matzevot. It actually became a technical term in archaeology. But of course, you don't know what matzevot are unless you speak Hebrew. A matzevah has two meanings in Hebrew. In modern Hebrew, matzevah is the tombstone in a cemetery over the tomb itself, sometimes with an inscription commemorating the deceased. But this is not what I mean when I say matzevah in this context. In Hebrew, in biblical Hebrew, matzevah basically means a standing stone. Nitzav, standing. Matzevah, standing stone. And these are usually associated with religious cults. It's interesting to find that we have one here on one side, another on the other side, as if as the symbols of the deity, the local deity, protect the gate. That's not where it stops, because if you look to the right, you will see another feature. Over here, there's a nice podium built in stone. This is it. Again, look carefully at the architecture. Up to this point, it's the original structure, and from this point on, it's the addition, the reconstruction made by the archaeologists who preserved the gate. You see it everywhere, basically. And the dividing line in concrete here tells you that this is original and this is new. What is the purpose of this podium? Well, another matzevah, another stone was found here. This time depicting a deity, a god, with raised arms, and something that looks like a horn, or perhaps the moon, the crescent of the moon on top. What is this? Well, obviously this is the local god. We don't know his name. We can speculate, but this is really worthless, because we don't know exactly who the people living here were at the time. So, who owned this city? I can tell you that archaeologists believe today that this site, which is northeast of the Kinneret, was part of a kingdom in the First Temple period. Not an Israeli kingdom, not a Jewish kingdom. It's a kingdom known in the Bible as the kingdom of Geshur. Who are the Geshurians? we've got no idea. Some speculate that maybe they are Hittites in origin. Some speculate that they are Arameans. I think they're Arameans. You know why? Because when they're mentioned in the Bible several times, they're mentioned with the Arameans. Now, the Arameans are in Syria, Lebanon and Syria. These are the Arameans' kingdoms. Here we speak about the Geshurians. Perhaps they're cousins. They're not Jewish, but back then in the biblical times, in the First Temple period, that wasn't that important. How do I know? Well, the Bible says that the king of this kingdom, whose name was Talmai, had a daughter. Her name was Ma'acha. And Ma'acha married the king of the United Monarchy, King David. Ma'acha and David had a son. His name, Absalom, Avshalom in Hebrew. And when Avshalom fled from Jerusalem due to some family matters, he found refuge in his grandfather's city in the land of Geshur. He spent 3 years here until he was called back to Jerusalem. So this may have been the capital city of Geshur. There's nothing like it in the region. The Geshurians are usually thought of as being settling the area east of the Kinneret and north of the Kinneret, so we're in the right territory. And there's nothing like this. Such impressive gate, the largest perhaps from the time. It's quite impressive. Maybe it's the capital. And if it is, then maybe 3,000 years ago, Avshalom, the son of David, came along this path into the city. But did he see what we see today? This gate? Unfortunately, no, he didn't. This gate is dating from the 9th and the 8th centuries BC. But there was an earlier gate. Where? Underneath us. It was excavated and then covered. So the 10th century gate, from the time of David, is hidden from the eye. This gate is from the 9th and 8th centuries BC. Welcome, therefore, perhaps, to the capital of the kingdom of Geshur. You'd like to know its name? We've got no idea. But the Bible mentions a place called Tzer in Geshur. Maybe this is the city of Tzer, mentioned in the book of Joshua, chapter 19. The story of Geshur, if it is Geshur, is fascinating. But here, there's another story. A story that links us back to the story of Jesus and his disciples. To explore that, I'd like to take you into the city, into the quarters built in the Second Temple period. In the Second Temple period, the entire geopolitical situation obviously changed. If this was the capital of the kingdom of Geshur, perhaps in the First Temple period, now everything's different. There are no Geshurians, there are no kingdoms here. There are the Romans, the overlords of the country in the time of Jesus. And this area is controlled by Philip, the brother of Herod Antipas. They are the two sons of King Herod. The site has two names in antiquity. One, given to it in the 1st century AD, is Iulias, or Julius, after the name of the wife of Emperor Augustus, or, according to another tradition, his daughter. The other name is way better known. It is BETSAIDA. What does BETSAIDA mean? Well, BETSAIDA is in Aramaic. Beit, just like in Hebrew, Bait, a house. Tsaida, or Tsayada, in Aramaic means a hunter or a fisherman, which is very interesting, because here we see an excavation. I'm sorry, it's not very impressive, but that's the case in many sites in the Holy Land. The remains seem to be unimpressive. Once you get to know them well, they're much more impressive. What we see here is a house. I'm standing right now inside the house kitchen, according to the vessels found here. And it is adjacent to the main road going next to the house. And there are other houses to the left and to the right. In this house, some interesting objects were found, testifying to its nature, perhaps. One such find are lead net weights used for fishermen's nets. Another interesting find, connected with the other, is fish hooks. So it seems that this place might have some connection to fishing. Is this a fisherman's house? Maybe. That's what the excavators believe. Were they Jewish or pagan? That's an interesting question. How do you decide who are the people living in a certain site? Can you tell their religion just by excavating their houses? Well, sometimes we're lucky, and yes, we can. For instance, if we find mikvaot, ritual baths, they are typical of Jewish settlements. Not only Jewish settlements, but mainly of Jewish settlements during the Second Temple period and even after. In here, we have no ritual baths, but what we do have are broken stone vessels. Now, stone vessels are the hallmark of Jewish identity in archaeological excavations in the Second Temple period and beyond that. Why? Because in most cases in antiquity, people would use the cheaper, easier to make vessels that are made of ceramic, of pottery. But Jews insisted on using stone vessels. Why is that? It has to do with Jewish religion and Jewish restrictions on impurity. If you wish to live a pure life, you'd use stone vessels in antiquity. Why? Because they cannot be impure. They cannot become impure, unlike pottery that can become impure. If you have a ceramic cup and it's unclean, the only thing you can do with it is break it. You can't purify it. There's no way. But stone vessels are tum'ah proof. Tum'ah is uncleanness. They never become unclean. So when you find these stone vessels, you know you're on safe ground. This is a Jewish house. So this is a Jewish fisherman, perhaps. Very nice. Do we know the names of people who may have lived here in the time of Jesus? Well, not by excavations, of course. It's quite rare to find inscriptions in archaeology in the Holy Land, in the land of Israel. But in this case, we have the New Testament. The New Testament tells us that 3 of the apostles of Jesus came from BETSAIDA: Philip, Peter, and Andrew. They grew up here as children. This is their hometown. Now, if this is Bethsaida, can you imagine it? Maybe this was one of the houses of one of the apostles. Maybe as children they played along the road over there, not knowing what the future holds for them, not knowing that they will become part of one of the greatest stories in the history of humanity. They are going to change the course of human history. They are going to participate in the creation of the largest monotheistic religion in the world today, which is quite amazing. But that's not all of it. Bethsaida is also known from the scripture as a place that brought upon itself the wrath of Jesus. And I'm reading now from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 10. And Jesus says in verse 13, "Woe to you, Chorazin! Woe to you, Bethsaida! For if the miracles that were performed in you had been performed in Tyre or Sidon," these are definitely pagan cities, "they would have repented long ago, sitting in the sackcloth and ashes," repenting, that is. "But it will be more bearable for Tyre and Sidon at the judgment than for you. And you, Capernaum, will you be lifted up to the skies? No, you will go down to the depths." Jesus foretells the demise of Capernaum, Chorazin, and Bethsaida. We've been to Capernaum. This is Bethsaida, and Chorazin is not far away. Bethsaida is also the place where Jesus performs an interesting miracle, the healing of the blind in the Gospel of Luke. That miracle is interesting because it happens in stages. Jesus performs one act and he asks the blind guy, "Do you see?" And he says, "No, not yet. I see vaguely blurred picture." And Jesus goes on to perform the entire miracle, and suddenly the blind man can see. This gradual miracle has probably a theological significance in the sense that it symbolizes, for many Christian theologians, it symbolizes the nature of the mystery of the Messiah, the mystery of Christ. That is the gradual revelation of the truth of the Messiah. It begins slowly and gradually until eventually the entire humanity recognizes the truth of the message. So we have here potentially a very important site from the Christian perspective, right? Or is it? Let me take you back for a second to the name Bethsaida. Bethsaida probably means the house of the fishermen. We have a house identified as a house of a fisherman in Bethsaida. Everything looks very well. It fits nicely. It's generally in the right location, north of the Kinneret. Fine. So what seems to be the problem? I'll tell you what's the problem. But to do so, I'd like to take you to the southern end of this beautiful site and look for the Kinneret, for the Sea of Galilee. And then I'll tell you what's the problem. Come with me. I'm now standing on the southern end of the Mount of Bethsaida, looking towards the Kinneret. This is the most beautiful view here. You see the Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee in front of you, the area of Magdala, Mount of Beatitudes to the right, Kursi on the eastern side of the Kinneret, and of course the main city of Tiberias. That's the main city today. It wasn't this way in antiquity always. And there's one thing you can see clearly from here. We are simply too far from the Sea of Galilee. It's about 2,000 meters away. That's around 1.5 miles. If this is a fisherman's city, BETSAIDA, the house of the fisherman, where's the sea? Who builds a city of fishermen or a village of fishermen so far from the sea? The excavators here, who believe this is indeed BETSAIDA, suggest that there's a solution to that. They would tell you that if you look at the Kinneret today, you're being misled. It is an optical illusion because the Kinneret used to be higher. The level of the water was higher, and it probably reached this area below us, filled it with water. And back in antiquity, 2,000 years ago, in the time of Jesus, that would be a fisherman's village on the shores of the Kinneret. That would be down here. It is a plausible explanation. We know that the Kinneret was higher in elevation in antiquity. However, there's a problem here. In excavations conducted for the last couple of years, immediately to the shores of the Kinneret, a village or a town was found. It is dating from the time of Jesus, 2,000 years ago, just as this place that we call now BETSAIDA. But wait a second. If the Kinneret extended down to here 2,000 years ago, it means that no one could have lived in a city on the present shores of the Kinneret. But we see in our own eyes that on that side, known as El Araj, there are buildings. People lived there. So what? Were they scuba diving? Did they live underwater? Of course not. It seems that that proves that the theory that there was a kind of a lagoon, an extension of the Kinneret down to here, doesn't hold water. It can't be true. And therefore, 2,000 years ago, this site was still 2,000 meters away from the shores of the Kinneret. And if so, how can we call it BETSAIDA, a village of fishermen so far away? All right, so maybe it's not BETSAIDA. Where would BETSAIDA be? Perhaps at the other site I just told you about, at the shores of the Kinneret, El Araj, that's the name, or the House of the Beck, because we find houses there dating from the right period. It's near the Kinneret. Maybe the original BETSAIDA was there. So we really got quite excited about this site, and there's still much to be excited about, but maybe we got the wrong site, at least for BETSAIDA. Time would probably tell.